What's going on, y'all? Shout out to the LDBC. It's your boy Fight Critic, and I'm here to give you episode 6 of the Suckapunch podcast. We took a little bit of a break in February with the Super Bowl going on and NBA All-Star Weekend and all that's going on. I really wasn't in the mood to do a lot of podcasts. It really didn't make much sense. Plus, there wasn't really any big fights going on either. There was like some fights here or there that kind of took place. Just nothing really that really gravitated, at least me, to want to get involved and try to, get fights as far as like to give my prediction and my reviews and all that shit like that. I wasn't really too much interested in it. But I did want to do this podcast. I'm not going to lie. I really almost didn't do this one. I went to brunch earlier and I was wild smacked. But I sobered up and I was like, I need some time to go by, especially because I really had nothing else to do for the rest of the day, so I might as well just get an episode going. But first and foremost, I wanted to give a shout out to everybody that tunes in. I don't often get a lot of people that jump into the live stream. I just haven't built my channel the same way that it once was, where I could put out videos consistently because I had so much free time to do it. My time is very, very sparingly, which is why I try to do these Sunday streams. And I'm trying to learn more and more to incorporate other people into it, so I am going to try my best to try to get, a guest every now and then to join me so that we can talk about it, so that this way you're not just hearing my voice for X amount of point in time. But I did want to do this podcast because I did want to go over a lot that's been going on, especially right now when it comes to the heavyweight division in boxing. There's just so much that's pissed me off about the heavyweight division in boxing, especially with a lot of the news that's come out. And more importantly, how do us as fans kind of don't really benefit much from what's going on in the sport. But yeah, I mean, that's going to be my main talking point tonight. I did want to spend some time talking about some rumors that have been circling around as far as Gennady Golovkin, as well as other small bits and pieces of things that have been popping up recently. But when it comes to a lot of things that's been happening in the middleweight division, of course, Canelo Alvarez is fighting Danny Jacobs in a unification fight at 160 pounds. They will fight for the WBA, WBC, and IBF middleweight titles. And of course, with all that happening, you also have to expect there to be a lot of major players in the division. There's been recent talks that Billy Joe Saunders is moving up to super middleweight. He's going to fight his little fluff fight and probably end up fighting for a title pretty soon. Demetrius Andrade kind of doesn't really have an opponent. So I think Demetrius Andrade might be the right type of an opponent selection for Gennady Golovkin. I know the WBO was contemplating putting Gennady Golovkin as the #1 ranked challenger for their fight. And I honestly think it's not a bad move to make, especially considering the fact that it's a good fight. And looking at Gennady Golovkin and his age, he's not going to get any younger from this point on. So you might as well put him in the ring with somebody like a Demetrius Andrade. Give him another opportunity to, to go for an NBA, to go for, another title, and see where you can take that point. But I do believe that ultimately it will come down to, what do the terms look like? What do the fight figures look like? How much money is he going to make? And so on and so forth. I do believe that Demetrius Andrade presents Gennady Golovkin with a very difficult fight. I think he's probably going to be one of the best opponents that he'll have in his career. Demetrius Andrade, despite the fact that he hasn't lived up to the expectations that a lot of us had. But when you get down to the core of it, he's still a very dynamic fighter. He's a fighter that fights to the level of his opposition, which at times can, deter us away from wanting to watch him. And then at the same time, it allows us to be much more critical of his performances, which isn't a bad thing. I think if you're a guy who we put on a high pedestal, you should be blowing out your competition, especially if the competition isn't worthy. But when you look at other guys who have almost like kind of gotten by and they've not really like done much and they get a lot of praise for it, Demetrius Andrade isn't that type of guy. So him fighting a Gennady Golovkin, especially right now, there's still a lot to be gained from him fighting and beating Triple G. For Triple G, there is talks that he might be potentially signing with DAZN. The rumor that is circling is that he is due to be getting a multi-fight deal that will more than likely see him get paid a significant guarantee, and the prospect ideas of him potentially matching up between Canelo, Jacobs, or Andrade, which one of the three bunch. But there's also a very specific and underlying detail that is kind of getting thrown into here, which is there are talks that Gennady Golovkin was able to negotiate an equity stake in DAZN itself. Now, a lot of people are not really well versed on equity and what it means. I'm not going to sit there and kind of bore you with technical terms, but when somebody gets equity in a company, it means that they're allowed to get a certain portion of value that the company establishes for themselves, kind of making them somewhat of what you call a partial owner. Now, to give you just like a couple of examples, LeBron James has a 2% equity stake in Liverpool. The only difference between LeBron James's equity stake and what I'm going to describe with Gennady Golovkin's equity stake is LeBron's equity stake is built off of an investment that he made within Liverpool, which is the football club based out in the UK. There are company executives who get paid strictly through their equity shareholders. This is how, they get large percentages of the company, and that's how they get paid on a yearly basis. And many point in times, they do it in a sense because they're taking a $1 salary from the company. So like guys like Bill Gates, Tim Cook, they have a large equity stake in the company, in which that's how they make their yearly, salary for in some certain points. But when it comes to Gennady Golovkin, much like if you are a worker who works in a very, very, very wealthy company, you have the opportunity to get an equity stake in the company. You can get it in a multitude of forms. You could negotiate a way that part of your base salary that is paid to you is then reinvested back into the company at a specific rate. Or what you can also negotiate as well is you can negotiate the opportunity to receive a free equity stake, which is the company takes a value of what it feels like its share price is, whether it be public or private, and then they give you a certain amount of shares that they potentially own, and they just give it to you as an equity stake in the company. The only difference with this type of equity stake in comparison to getting an investment and seeing a return on that investment is that this investment that you get, as far as like you don't have to put anything in, you pay a larger tax rate on it because it is strictly capital gains. Whereas if you take your own money and put it into a company and let's say they get money back, you only pay a capital gains tax based on what the profit is. between what you've earned, not on your initial investment. So for a lot of companies, it really just deters on what their value is. It's much easier for private companies when it comes to gaining assets because they probably believe that Gennady Golovkin, they are investing in him to increase their subscription numbers, their viewership numbers, bring whatever branding or marketing into the company. And overall, they might be potentially looking at it in a position to where they feel that this is probably the best thing that they can do is in investing in a fighter this way. For Gennady Golovkin, it means that he's ultimately going to end up in a position to where he owns a portion of his company. And I know a lot of people have been asking, the $1 million question on Twitter is, well, what happens if DAZN loses money and so on and so forth? Well, for Gennady Golovkin, it doesn't matter if DAZN wins or loses money when it comes to this equity state, because him as a tax-paying citizen, which he will more than likely be doing here in the United States since he is earning money in the United States, it means for him that he gets to put off in writing into his tax rate. And what that means is at the end of the year, let's say I bring back the LeBron example, and let's say LeBron James takes that 2% that he invested into Liverpool and he sells it. He reaps all that profit that he's gotten back, which is a shit ton of money based on when he invested and what he got back. He would be filling out essentially a 1099 form. A 1099 form is a form that you get based on your broker, who is the person that is facilitating this deal, that keeps a record of your sales for your stocks. And he would basically be using that form. For Gennady Golovkin, his form will be different. See, more than likely, DAZN as a business will file a specific form very similar to what's called the K1 form. Because they're a large corporation, they'll probably be filling out a different version of the K1 form because more than likely they have more board members. But for Gennady Golovkin, he is going to get what's called a 1040X form. A 1040X form is based on if you have equity stake in the company in which that doesn't involve an initial investment that's made. That means that, let's say DAZN loses money on the year, Gennady Golovkin can write off on his taxes that he's received a percentage of whatever they lose as a tax break, and which means that will be money that he will be getting back. How significant it is going to be based on what he brings in and what his shows cost. I know it's a lot of mathematical terms to keep up with, so trust me when I say that I understand if all this is a little bit too confusing for you. But overall, that's how essentially those things are pretty much set up to be. A lot of times when a lot of people talk about, equity, they don't really know the different aspects of equity. Equity can be a multitude of things. And what the talk is that Gennady Golovkin got equity where guys like Eddie Hearn, Canelo Alvarez, or even Anthony Joshua didn't get equity. And mostly for a lot of people, they're looking at the initial advantage of what the dollar amount is. Gennady Golovkin is more likely playing the long game with DAZN, with the hopes that it does become a large subscription-based service in which it will be making money for years to come. The risk is that, number one, DAZN does not have, in my opinion, the capital to compete with other sports about it. Oh, yeah, time to ending up. Yeah, 1040X is, if you're a business owner, you file a 1040. You get a 1040X when you file your business under a K1 tax form. You use that 1040X essentially. What you can do with it is, let's say, like, for me, I'll use my example. My business did not make or lose that much money this year. So for me, ultimately, I technically didn't have to wait to file my personal taxes when I did my business taxes. I filed my personal taxes ahead of time because I don't put my business on my W-4. I get paid as an individual on my W-4. Actually, not my W-4, my W-9, I should say. I get paid as an individual on my W-9 as opposed to an LLC where it's a partnership and so on and so forth. As far as when it comes to my business got filed for a K1. From the K1, I get a 1040X back. A 1040X back is a form that I could use to then go into my personal taxes should I want to claim it and amend my personal tax return to include whatever gain or losses that my business got. Because my business this year came out slightly in the red, not by a lot, maybe by like a couple $100, it made no sense for me to actually file a 1040X and amend my personal return because I wouldn't be getting anything back more than what was expected. Maybe I get back an extra $60, $80, but it wouldn't make much sense. And with a 1040X, that form is good for 3 years. So let's say next year I don't make I don't make back in my return a lot, or I make so much back in my return that I'm like, fuck it, let me go back and amend this. Then I could probably go back and do it. But a 1040X form is really big if you're going to be doing an amended tax break to your personal taxes, where your business taxes are there, and then you're looking at your return and you're like, I probably could make more money if I claim what my business did as well, along with my personal taxes. So I could use that 1040X. But 1040X is very, 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 very beneficial if you are in like a mid-sized business where you guys are still not at the corporation level, but you guys make a significant amount of income to where that it really makes, a very, very important reason for you to actually file those taxes. For a lot of people, when it comes to what I was mentioning previously about Gennady Golovkin getting equity, as far as Anthony Joshua, Eddie Hearn, and Canelo Alvarez not getting any equity, or Golden Boy at that, those guys elected to receive a large payment of what they'll be, as opposed to playing the long game. And you necessarily can't be mad at them. They're looking at it as if, this is going to be hot. They're going to have a lot of money in the initial forefront. It's basically used how a startup company does, where they're looking to compete in the market. They're looking at who are the giants in this market and how can we attract those people to come to our company, with the long game being that we'll be in the red for a couple of years, but we'll be able to make enough money to be functional and be able to assess how cost is, but we'll gain investors, we'll gain over time the ability to reach out to new markets, and so on and so forth. My head is crazy when it comes to business, by the way. But yeah, that's ultimately what Gennady Golovkin, as far as like in the long game, he's playing with the zone, whereas other people, they're just wanting to get their payment up front. Because they realize that this is a hot opportunity for them to, jump the gun and get a huge payment. And when you look at Canelo Alvarez getting $365 million, that's going to attract the initial wave of people coming in. But Canelo's going to get his payment up front. When you talk about Eddie Hearn getting $1 billion budget over 8 years, that's money that he's going to be guaranteed to. But eventually, the zone more than likely is going to run into the problem of how American sports are. And I had a conversation with somebody who doesn't really know much about American sports, so I didn't spend so much time really jumping into the ins and out of what he was talking about or how he felt about it, and so on and so forth. So basically what I told him was, and what I made him aware of was the fact that the zone has a couple of big giants here in the United States that it has to compete with. If you're going to compete on a streaming platform, then you're going to have to compete with all the major networks that stream. And a lot of people felt that, the zone is just going to be able to compete with, Showtime and HBO and so on and so forth. And that's not necessarily the case, to be honest. And what I mean by that is, well, they're a company that is targeting, like they're targeting combat sports, but they're also targeting other sports. They've got a huge international buy rate for football, or international football, not American football. So they show those games on, and yeah, that's good and that's important. But when you look at the landscape of how those sports appear here in the US, there's not a big market for it. There's a big reason why ESPN didn't really care much to keep the Champions League going, even though it was heavy on the Champions League from the mid-2000s to the early 2010s. Now you don't really get to see that much of it on TV put in the forefront. So that presented an opportunity for the zone to jump in. But when you talk about the giants, your NBAs, your NFLs, those companies operate at a 20 times, profit margin than what boxing will. And just to give you some comparison, the zone gave Eddie Hearn an 8-year deal for $1 billion. I know a lot of people, like, they're still like, they're in shock and awe at how much money, that's been able to garner. For me, like, I have to compare that to other sports. So when I compare it to other sports, I'm like, cool, that's $1 billion. That's a lot of money, and it's spread across 8 years. The NBA, or I'll even just use the NFL, for example. The NFL is going to garner at least $50 billion over 8 years. And to a lot of people, that's massive. You're talking about $50 billion across 8 years. That's a lot of money in comparison to the $1 billion that DAZN is going to get across 8 years. So you're looking at a 50 times budget. The NBA is going to get around $30 billion across 8 years in terms of the deals that it makes. And the big reason is why these deals that the NFL and the NBA are making, they're making it with ABC, they're making it with CBS, they're making it with Fox as well, they're making it with TNT, ESPN, Amazon Prime, and so on and so forth. They're using companies that have streaming platforms, as well as the fact is that these sports are all incorporated under one organization, the NBA. There's a big difference between if the Celtics and the Lakers want to play each other, and then you got to find a promoter. Oh, we're going to negotiate this game. That doesn't work in the NBA. The NBA is like, this is the schedule. You guys are playing at this time, and so on and so forth. And then when you look at other aspects to it, you also got to think about the salaries that these players, are getting paid, their endorsement rates, how much attention that it garners, how it resonates to overseas. There's a lot of money that gets put into these sports. So for when you look at DAZN, if the long-term goal is that people feel that DAZN is going to be able to take this, to take this formula and apply it to the NBA and the NFL, it doesn't work because I don't think they've got the capital to compete with companies like Disney and Time Warner. Disney, Time Warner, these companies have a excuse me. These companies have a shit ton of money, and they invest heavily into these sports. Even college sports is a multi-billion-dollar industry where conferences make billion-dollar deals with TV satellite companies so that they can have their own networks. And then because these sports are all under one umbrella, the NFL has its own streaming package. The NBA has its own streaming package. And you have to now compete with that. So now you're going to be asking the broadcast rights, where not only does the umbrella have a direct supply to be doing that, but also you have to think about the aspect to it is you also have the other major players in the game who are, offering 10 times, 50 times your budget. And when I tell people that they don't, they don't make light conversation about it, or they don't say anything, or they're kind of pretty much shunned away by it, and they don't continue the conversation that we tend to have. But it's a very, very real thing. I think that for a lot of people, they need to understand just how important it is, for you to understand how deeply invested and rooted that this market is. And for me, ultimately, I think that for DAZN, for it to be successful, is it needs to gain viewership from other competitors. Paying Canelo Alvarez, $36 million twice a year, $70 million a year, dude, that's a shit ton of money. And for me, ultimately, how do you make that back? Oh yeah, and once again, shout out to the homie 1LVZ. I see you in there, bro. I know they keep trying to take away your channels and shit, bro. I understand. You know how YouTube is. They want to take away everything that we got. But yeah, like these, to do all of that it takes it takes a lot of money, and I just don't think that they're well equipped for it. If anything, I think ESPN is more well equipped to handle how it goes on, especially because ESPN is backed by Disney. Disney has a shit ton of money, and Disney is also going to start their own streaming platform. So now you're talking about they're able to now target the home and entertainment market and to put everything there, and then they've got ESPN for the sports platform. Has ESPN noticed a reduction in their and the people that have subscribed to the network? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean that they don't stop making money. Losing 2 million subscribers a year hurts DAZN more than it does ESPN, which can be in 85 million homes, And that's why I think ESPN is more well equipped. ESPN's problem is that they've made their streaming a premium content. And now they have to run the risk of, you got 85 million people who pay for free who stream for free because they're paying for your actual product through their cable or satellite subscription. You're not forcing them to ask for more money to buy into ESPN Plus. And that's where I believe that ESPN Plus is not going to find a big home for boxing. The UFC is well more equipped for it because UFC people who are consumers, they have been paying a shit ton of money just to watch their fights. These are people that have to buy 6-7 pay-per-views a year. And for them to be getting a shit ton of fights that they don't have to pay for pay-per-view for, that's one of the big reasons why it makes a lot of sense for the UFC to be on ESPN Plus, because it's a lesser profit as far as like, well, not lesser profit, but lesser cost overall. But for Gennady Golovkin, if he got equity, whereas his other parties involved in the sport didn't get equity, then to me, I think it's a win. It's a huge win. I think for him, he's going where he needs to go. He wants to be where a lot of the other fighters are that are in his division, and he's going to be somebody who wants to stick around and see where the company goes. If it's a win, then he wins. If it loses, then he still kind of wins if he's not putting any initial investment to his own money into the company. So that's how I ultimately feel about that. But yeah, no, if they finalize the deal, shout out to Gennady Golovkin. You know, he got his bread. And I'm gonna transition this to somebody else who got their bread. But first, let me talk about somebody who didn't get their bread. Later Alvarez. So, of course, you know, later Alvarez lost to Sergey Kovalev a couple months ago. And in the build up to the rematch that, you know, Top Rank was, you know, broadcasting his fights. They won the rights to it. It was told, you know, it was essentially told that later Alvarez will be signing with Top Rank to get a deal, which is perfectly fine. I don't believe there's nothing wrong with it. But then what kind of like put a question mark in my head was the nature of that deal. And the reason why I'm saying we'll put a question mark in it was the nature of that deal was mostly because that deal was structured based on guarantees if later Alvarez won his fight against Sergey Kovalev. So when people talk about that, and I'm like, oh yeah, you know, later Alvarez, you know, he got his deal, so on and so forth, blase, blase. And when I look back at it, later Alvarez was promised contingent on his win, he was going to be offered a minimum guarantee of $1 million over a course of the of course future multiple fights that he agreed to. So should he have beaten Sergey Kovalev, he would have been gotten, you know, that much amount of money. That all changed the minute he lost to Sergey Kovalev. He lost that guarantee, and then that guarantee got shifted all the way down to about $250,000. So he's only contingent on making the kind of money that he's making based on if he was a champion. And now because he's not a champion and he's in that deal, he's only going to make around $250,000, and he lost out on the guarantee of $1 million because of it. And I think it's a shitty deal that he took, which is why I'm trying to figure out why did they advise him to take that deal? Why was Ivan Michel so eagerly to take it? You know, why did Al Heyman give the okay to take it? So now later Alvarez finds himself in a weird position. He now has to fight for Top Rank. He can only make $250,000 and hope to get bonuses from the opponents. But what's the opponent selection like for him? He has to be contingent on getting back to being a champion, which means he's going to have to take some shorthanded deals to fight, you know, guys like Alexander Vosdik or fighting guys like Artur Beterbiev. How do those deals get constructed? How do those deals get negotiated? And I feel bad. I mean, I feel bad for the nature of the deal. I don't feel bad for him because he took a really bad deal on the table. But hey, if it happens, it happens. And then Arum turned around and he managed to get another deal negotiated to bring in Tyson Fury. And for Tyson Fury, this is the big deal of the week. And this is the deal that really pissed me off because I'm happy Tyson Fury got paid. My thing about Tyson Fury getting paid, though, is did you really need to do it? this point in time, the rematch was all but guaranteed to us. They had delayed purse bids. Only thing that we was trying to figure out is if this shit is going to be in Vegas or is it going to be in New York. I was hyped. I was like, yo, the minutes, tickets go on sale. I got some of the homies on Twitter like, yo, I'm looking at getting box seats. Yo, let me know if you want to come to the box seats, and I'll let you know what the price is. And, and so on and so forth. And the fact that all through that process, I'm like, yo, this is just about wrapped up. I think they're just waiting for, Anthony Joshua and Jarrell Miller to, sign off on their fight so that they can announce it. Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren don't fuck with each other, and Frank Warren is always going to be bitter in many ways. But to me, I was just sitting there and I was just like, yo, how does it's not adding up. It doesn't make sense. How is this possible? And then when they announced that deal, the first thing in my head is this rematch ain't happening. And one of the big reasons why is because, and for me, it's got to deal with the fact that there's one big elephant in the room, and that's Bob Arum. Bob Arum is just not the kind of guy that I trust with this level of a fight getting done in his hands. And it doesn't seem that it wants to get done unless it's him fucking over somebody. That's the kind of promoter that Bob Arum has turned to be. Everybody goes back and they talk about, well, Arum did this and Arum did that and so on and so forth. And I'm like, yeah, Arum has been able to do a lot of things. But what has he done lately? He's kept two of his premier fighters out of fighting in one of the bigger tournaments of the year. He's kept a lot of deals from happening. He's put deals on the tables where guys got to commit to him, and these guys have no interest in committing to him. So when I see a deal like this get done in the middle of a rematch that a lot of us had invested into, and don't let anybody sit there and say that, oh, nobody really cares about the rematch. Nah, we all cared about the rematch. Don't get it fucking twisted. But for all that to happen, and then in the end, we get this kind of deal that kind of happens, it left a really, really bad taste in my mouth, because at the end of it, I was just like, yo, how do you guys let this happen? How does this deal go through? Why couldn't this deal just wait until after the rematch? I would have preferred if it happened after the rematch. Whether or not whoever wins or loses, if Tyson Fury wanted to sign that deal, I would have been perfectly fine had he signed that deal afterwards. But now it's like it's so weird to kind of see it like kind of happen. Deontay Wilder now has to not only negotiate with Frank Warren, but he has to negotiate with Bob Arum. Bob Arum sent his first offer. His first offer is a one-fight deal that then, should Deontay Wilder take it, would turn into a 4-fight optional deal, with one of them maybe being Tyson Fury. There was no talk about guarantee of what he would be getting paid, and there was no talk about a guarantee of what the Tyson Fury fight would be. Now you have Deontay Wilder walking into a fight, and he has to put himself in a position where he's like, yeah, I have to win this next fight. And if I don't win this next fight, then I'm stuck in this deal. If I do win this fight, what are these next fights are, and which one is Tyson Fury? So when people talk about, oh, this is a great deal, he should take this deal, I said, cool. Name me what his figure is, and name me which fight is the Tyson Fury fight. Because if you can't do any of those two things, then what's the point of the fucking deal happening? What does Deontay Wilder benefit from getting paid an excessive amount if he's not going to get the fight that he wants to get, and he's not going to put himself in a position to where he wants to get, the leverage of going into an Anthony Joshua fight? The Tyson Fury ESPN deal, it kind of keeps him a bridge from Anthony Joshua, because Bob Arum is ESPN when it comes to the boxing side. The one guy who was drastically upset about not being able to get a deal with a network because Al Haymon was exclusive, got himself an exclusive deal on one of the networks, and the same person that he sued for having his deal, he's the one that's doing, the same shit. I don't think there's any way that you could sit there as a boxing fan and really make sense to this to me. I don't think is in it to be giving us this rematch. I could be very well wrong. Like, don't get me wrong. I could definitely be wrong. But there's just too much, there's too much substance that's on the table with Arum. And there's so many people who played a blind fucking eye to it. If Bob Arum wasn't willing to let Jose Ramirez enter into the 168 World Boxing Super Series tournament, what makes you believe that he's going to want to make these kind of fights? When you look at the fact that Jose Ramirez is fighting guys that he's favored 16-1 to beat, and you got guys like Regis Prograis, who's stepping into his first world title fight in a fight that's going to get more attention than Jose Ramirez, when we wanted Jose Ramirez to fight Prograis. That's the part that, like, for me, I don't understand how people can sit there and they could be like, oh, they'll get the deal done, yada, yada, yada. I just don't believe it ultimately. I think that when it's all said and done, I just don't think that, this rematch is happening. And I feel bad because at the end of the day, as much as I wanted to give, Fury all the credit in the world going into the rematch, I now have to hold back to it. And the reason why I have to hold back at it is we found out the deal that he had for the Wilder rematch was a 50-50 split with pay-per-view incentive on top of it. And he sat on that deal for a week and did nothing. You can't have everything that you asked for, a 50-50 deal with pay-per-view on top of it, and you sat on it for a week. I mean, if this is what you negotiated, then I can understand the incentive of you taking a bigger deal there if you felt that you wasn't getting enough money or if the deal was shady. But this is a great deal. You're getting the same split for a fight that was projecting to do double its original revenue. And for some reason, you felt that, let me listen to what Arum has to say. Now, there have been massive figures thrown around for Tyson Fury's deal. There's anything from, I've heard as low as 60 million. I've heard as high as 100 million. And a lot of people are asking, well, what's the truth? What's the truth? What's the truth? What's the truth to it? Well, Arum hasn't confirmed what the figure is. Me personally, I believe that Tyson Fury is set to get paid a guarantee amount, but I think his deal is going to be contingent on if he gets these fights against Joshua and Wilder. So if it's contingent on these fights happening, then if I'm somebody who is, Deontay Wilder, I make Arum work for it. I said, hey, if you want me to fight Tyson Fury, and if Tyson Fury's deal is constructed around making sure that he gets these fights, then I need something out of this. Because you're the one that's paying him this amount. You need to make that back. He needs to deliver on his deal. I don't got to give you shit. And if I'm Deontay Wilder, I walk into the negotiation that way. I know a lot of people are going to look at it and be like, why are you going to look at it that way? And the big reason why I'm looking at it like that is mostly because if I'm Wilder, I'm like, hey, I don't want you having any rights to my fights. I want a one-fight deal, and I want X amount of money. And that one-fight deal has to be Fury. I'm not interested in taking a filler fight and marinating this shit like the way that you want to do, since you were marinating fights like fucking Juan Manuel Lopez and fucking Yuriorkis Gamboa. So if I'm Fury, I don't know why he took a deal like this where it's performance-based and there's no guarantee. And for Anthony Joshua and Jarrell Miller, there's been a lot of people who have been talking about their fight, and they've been talking about all the things that it's been doing, the Madison Garden record and things like that. And look, let me keep it real with you. I could give two shits about that Madison Square Garden record. And the big reason why I could give two shits about it, and something that's very, very real that I have to explain to y'all, is that deal that when that ticket price came out and it said we are releasing these tickets on a pre-sale. Did you notice who was on the pre-sale? Because it wasn't just MSG. Now, every fight in the United States, whenever they create a ticket sale, you got to go through the venue to get a ticket when the initial tickets come out. There's never been another time where I've seen a promoter promote a third-party organization on a ticket pre-sale. And if you can find one, let me know. But the fact that Eddie Hearn promoted Joshua versus Miller tickets where you can buy them at MSG and StubHub, of course they were going to hit that damn pre-sale record mark because you had fucking StubHub buying all these damn tickets. And now them tickets is 3 times their value. There are people who are going to be paying $600 to sit in the nosebleed at Madison Square Garden. Yo, I don't like the Garden enough. And just to give you some context, when I sat for Gennady Golovkin versus David Lemieux, that ticket was a $50 ticket. And I sat right at the beginning of the upper bowl. It's right where you can still see in the ring, and you're right below where they have the TVs for the people who are in the nosebleeds. That section. That section is about $800 on StubHub. That price ticket through the Garden originally released somewhere around $200. And for a lot of people to be really, really excited about this pre-sale market, how much it is, I went to StubHub has almost 900 tickets active daily for this fight, and the cheapest ticket is $600. You don't seriously believe that for some reason that they wouldn't have hit the mark if they didn't include StubHub? I honestly want to know how many tickets did StubHub purchase through what they were allowed to in comparison to what MSG actually sold, because there's no way for Eddie Hearn to take a selective amount of tickets and give them to StubHub. He has to allow StubHub the ability to buy tickets directly through that MSG portal so that this way they can sell it back. That is the only way that that deal goes through. It doesn't work the same way when you look at how it works in the UK. In the US, it's much different. StubHub has to buy the tickets through the box office. That means whoever are on these accounts that are StubHub executives that have workers that have these profiles that buy the accounts, they do it. And then they reprice the tickets. There are also people who bought MSG tickets strictly through the portal as a regular consumer so that they can sell on StubHub because they know the value of it. I almost did that shit. So when people talk about it, I'm like, yeah, it's real easy for them to hit that actual mark, especially when you consider the fact that, bruh, you got StubHub that you're promoting on the ticket sales. And then when you look at the general sale of tickets, when they release the general sale, there's probably not going to be a lot of general sale tickets up. So it's a much, much different thing. And then when you look at the fact that eventually that they're going to have to open up seating based on what's sold, what will walk into the attendance arena will be much different from what they were projected to sell. And I think for a lot of people, when they look at it, it's going to be very, very difficult as far as what's real and what's not real when you think back to it. But for me, I'm not fooled one bit. I'm just going to be honest with you. I am not fooled, not one bit. I look at everything that Hearn has done as a promoter. I've looked at everything that Joshua is doing as a fighter. I've looked at how their business deals have been constructed, and I look at the fact that a lot of it tends to be, misinformation to a bit. But how does this shit makes it a big ass messy situation? You have not only StubHub, not only MSG selling tickets. It's a lot. And ultimately, in the end, we'll see what happens. But those are my thoughts. Thank you guys for joining me this evening. I'm going to get out of here for the night. I'm going to go watch the Knicks play the rest of this game since it's fantasy basketball season still, and I got to figure out how I'm going to win this week. Shout out to all y'all that tuned in. Shout out to y'all who will listen to this on the back end. I will try to get back with another one next weekend, all right? Later.